How you doing? You look good. You look good. Yeah, somebody said, I know it. You can turn to somebody next to you and say, man, you're awesome. Give them a high five. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Man, I felt like I was going to lose my voice singing this morning. Wasn't that so good? Man, such a good song. Our team, yeah, give them a high five. Well, we can't really do it right now. But when you see them, give them a high five because, man, they put so much time and effort and work into that, but just pour their hearts into it. We're so grateful for that. Well, as you know, we're doing something a little different today. I love the promo videos. First of all, I am so geeked about at the movies. I can't even tell you. I'm a movie guy, so I'm excited. But today, I am just as excited because we've been wrapping up this series last month, well, still this month, but all about developing a servant's heart, right? We've talked about what that looks like, what it means for us following God and allowing Him to develop that heart in us. So what is today? We're talking about, you saw that video about leadership. Well, let me ask you this question. Do you consider yourself a leader? Now, before you say no, if you're thinking, well, I'm not a boss, and I'm not really a coach, I'm not really a teacher, do you have friends? If you said no to that, come to me afterwards and I'll be your friend. Do you have a family? Do you have coworkers? Do you see at least one human being at least once a week? If you answered yes to any of those, my friend, you are a leader. Because as we follow God, we are called to lead others to Jesus. When we talk about leadership, it's intertwined with servant. Leader and servant, because if you lead, you have to serve. And if you serve, you must lead. The way that God orchestrates all of this is incredible. And so today, I'm so excited that we get to talk about this. Because it's like this culmination of everything we've brought through the month of June and developing a servant's heart to say, okay, God, so how do I follow you? How do I lead others to you? That's what we get to dig into today. And so when I ask you that question, it's really, I think it's important for us to talk about that and address that first. Because, and I'm guilty of it too, when I think of a leader or leadership, or I watch a video like that promo, or that bumper, I think my mind automatically goes to this big, like, maybe a corporation and a team, maybe sports, right? And these kinds of things. But God is the ultimate leader. Because Jesus came as the King of Kings and chose to serve. That's what a leader looks like. Someone that says, it's not about me, it's about you. That's a leader. That's true leadership. And sometimes we see it in the corporate world. We see it in schools. We see it in things where they take these principles that really are founded in the Bible of what it means to be a good leader. Leadership is all about reaching out to others, to inspire and encourage others. It's not about lording authority over people. If you are a boss, then you can be a good leader by serving your employees. Or you can be one of those bosses that just says, just do this and get that done, and that's it. We have the choice. Wherever we find ourselves, and this is key, as we dig into this is key. You don't have to be a boss. You don't have to be an employer. You don't have to be a coach. In your own home, you can lead. Your friends, your community, you can lead. We have opportunities everywhere, all around us, to lead others and inspire others and encourage them in this life. We get to do that. And so today, we're going to look at one in particular person who, in the Bible, this guy was a leader. In fact, he was an incredible leader, second, of course, to Jesus, who is the ultimate. But this guy, he had some things happen in his life, and the way he responded to that are qualities of an incredible leader that we get to look at today and go, okay, so this is what it needs to look like. He had conviction. He had perseverance. He had integrity. He had all of these qualities. And we're looking at that in the context of serving people and loving others the way God does. And we're going to look at this brick by brick. We're building this foundation. This is Nehemiah that we're talking about in the Bible. If you've never read the book of Nehemiah, we're going to look at it a little bit today. You get a glimpse of it, but I highly encourage you, read that book. Because this guy knew how to lead. He knew how to respond to the situation at hand. And we're looking at 5 points today of how Nehemiah was an effective leader. And this first one is so key for starting in leadership. And it's the fact that Nehemiah led with vision and prayer. Vision and prayer. Now, when we think of vision, again, we talk about this sometimes in the setting of we have to have a vision, and we talk about that in our sermon series too. Without vision, we lose focus. We lose direction. We get sidetracked. It's the squirrel thing, right? Where it's like you're going along and all of a sudden you get sidetracked because this looks pretty good. Vision keeps us locked in. And Nehemiah begins his journey with a burden and a vision because he hears about the walls of Jerusalem being broken down. Now, this was towards the end of the captivity that the people of Israel were in captivity in Babylon, and this was at the end of that. So Nehemiah, who, by the way, he was not a preacher, he was not a prophet, he was not anybody in that culture that they would have thought, he's high up here. He was just an everyday average Joe. An average Jehoiakim. Trying to think of like this guy was an average guy. He was a layman. He was not anything like what you would think of, especially in that culture, being like a lot of influence and all this stuff. But he had one thing that was pretty interesting. He had access to the most powerful person in the world, which was the king of Persia. So this Nehemiah hears about the walls of Jerusalem being broken down. The temple had been rebuilt, which was awesome. But the problem is the walls kept invaders out, and so the walls were broken down, and so people were still getting in. And his heart breaks because this is his homeland. These are his people. And so he hears this news, and we look at this in Nehemiah chapter 1, 4 through 7. It says, "When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And then I said, Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant. I'm praying this before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. And I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly towards you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws that you gave your servant Moses." And notice that Nehemiah was very PC there. No, not politically correct. There was praise and there was confession. He started his prayer hearing this news, and he just praised God for who he is. Praising God for his love and his mercy and his goodness, even in the midst of storms, especially in the midst of troubles. And then he confessed. He said, you know this, God, and I'm being very open and honest with you. We disobeyed you. We got ourselves into this mess. And yet you have been merciful and allowed us to go back home. That's so important when we approach God. When we find ourselves in a position of being able to lead somebody in this life, to encourage them. But when we hear things that affect us, one way or another, what's our response? Is it to turn inward? Is it to say, I got to figure this out? I got to pull up my bootstraps, roll up my sleeves, and get after this? Or we say, first, priority number one, God, you are awesome. You are my God. And regardless of whether things are going really good for me or really terrible, you're still on the throne. That's the key that we need to start with. Because that brings that focus, that vision to say, this is what matters, is my God. Because everything stems from him, in and through me. And then, we just need to have an honest conversation with him. We know that God knows everything, but he is so desperately desiring for us to just be open with him. Because that's when that relationship begins to deepen. When we have a conversation and say, God, I know you know this, but I'm really struggling right now. Or God, I am just celebrating you right now, and I just want to give you the praise. Those kind of conversations is what God longs for, because he knows that's what begins to work in us. The second brick that we see of Nehemiah is that he led by taking initiative. So he heard this news and he prayed, and then he took steps. Remember James, when we talked about what James says, that don't just be a hearer of the word, but also be a doer of it. Look at what God says and then trust him. Look at this in Nehemiah 2, 4 and 5. The king said to me, the king is talking to Nehemiah. He's like, what do you want? What is it that you want? Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah, where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it. Again, notice Nehemiah's response. What did he do first? When the king asked him a question, what did he do? I prayed to my God. I prayed. He's seeking wisdom. I mean, whether it's the king of the known world or it's a friend of yours, we're all human beings and we're all equally valued in the eyes of God. And it doesn't matter if the situation seems to be just so huge or it's something that just kind of seems small. Everything matters to God. In every situation, we get the opportunity to pray to him. How many times, if you're a parent here, and you're like, oh God, I need wisdom so much. You got your kids, and they're asking you sometimes questions, you're just like, I have no idea. But we get to go to God in those moments. We get to lead our children and say, God, how do you want me to respond? What do you want me to say in this moment? Maybe it's a friend who's really struggling. Maybe it's a coworker who's just kind of having a bad attitude. We get to speak life into them. And just like Nehemiah did, our first response should be going to God and say, God, what can I say right now to this person? Or maybe I'm not supposed to say anything right now. Maybe I just need to be here. Maybe they just need a hug. God, give me wisdom and how to respond to that. And when Nehemiah did this, we see through the story that the king answered. The king said, okay, you got it. Go, and I'm going to give you everything you need. So this week I want you to identify one practical step. One thing that you can do for somebody in your life to encourage them, to inspire them to maybe take their next step with Jesus. Maybe just seeking wisdom on how to be there for them. The third brick we see is Nehemiah led by including and inspiring others. What is leadership when you're all by yourself? It's the fact that we get to serve each other. We get to encourage one another and lead each other just like Nehemiah was doing. Because effective leaders, they motivate and they mobilize people toward a common goal. Effective leaders do that. They motivate and they mobilize people to say, look, we need to do this. This has to be done. And we can do it. We've got the capability. We've got the abilities to do this. We got to go. As the church, God has given us a mission to tell people about Jesus, to love them the way he loves us. And we get to inspire each other in that because let's face it, we don't always feel like it. Our flesh is fighting against us. This world is not our home. The devil is trying to trip us up. And some days we're just like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to go home, I want to curl up on the couch, and watch Netflix. We just want to shut it off. But we say, well, but there's people that are going to hell right now. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong. We need time to just chill out. Don't hear me wrong on that. We need time to just chill and all that, but we can lose focus and then we kind of develop patterns of doing that. And before you know it, we're not in the Word and we're just kind of doing our own thing. And we have to come along each other and go, wait. There is work to be done. We get to rest for eternity. We get to party forever. But right now, this is the battlefield. And we get to inspire each other in that and say, we got this. You need a break? That's all right. But I'm not letting you go. I'll be calling you up here in a little bit. Nehemiah inspired others. Look at this in again, chapter 2, 17 and 18. He said, then I said to them, you see the trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me, and what the king had said to me. And they replied, well, let us start rebuilding. So they began the good work. I want you to notice something Nehemiah did right there. Besides pointing out the obvious, which sometimes we need that, he's like, it's in ruins. We got work to do. But look at what he said. He goes, I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. He got to tell him, I was before the king, and the king asked me what I wanted, and I told him, and he gave it to me, and here I am. He gets told that story. We get to tell those stories because I guarantee you, God is working in all of our lives, whether we see it or not. But the times that we notice it, we get to share those stories with people. We get to say, let me tell you what God did for me in my life. Time and time again, I hear stories. Time and time again, I reflect on my own life and think, man, I should have been dead. I should have been in jail. I should have been this or that. And God was so merciful. And there's been so many people that have been through some pretty terrible things. But they saw that God still delivered them. Still brought them to where they are today. We're still above ground and breathing. And we get to say, God did that for me. But beyond all that, because we're all going home one day. We have an eternal destination, one place or another. If God has saved you, that is enough to praise God. That He has saved us from the life we live. We call it turning our feet here when we were headed this direction with emptiness and shame and guilt and fear and anxiety. And then we met Jesus and He gave us that choice. And we said, I want to follow you. That alone is reason to praise God. He saved me from who I was in my sin. As David says in the Psalms, He pulled me out of that pit that I could not get myself out of. And now, as we're following Him, we get to lead others. Let me tell you what He did for me back here. He rescued me from something I couldn't rescue myself from. And you may not realize it, but you're in the same place. And He is reaching His hands out to you. Nehemiah shared that simple testimony and inspired them. You get to do that. You get to share the vision that you see, the prayers that you pray to God, the life that you live, and say, this is what God's done for me. And you can share that if you've got a team, employees, you can share that with your family. You can share that with a person maybe you haven't seen since high school. And you just saw them on Facebook, and you're like, hey, I've been thinking about you, and how about we get together for coffee or something? There's all kinds of opportunities for us to do that. Brick number 4. This is a tough one, but it's so cool when we trust God in it. Nehemiah led by facing opposition and did not give up. He led facing opposition, but he didn't give up. Leadership comes quite often with facing opposition. Especially when you're leading people to Jesus. The devil is fighting hard and constant against us. But even sometimes in just life, you just feel like, man, I'm just trying to get enough to pay the bills this week. And I feel like I'm just trying to provide for my family or help this person out. And it just keeps coming at me in waves. Opposition is a part of life, not only leadership, but just life. But Jesus made us a really incredible promise. And by the way, God never breaks a promise. He never forgets a promise. And he never not keeps it. And he said, in this world, you're going to have trouble. But take courage, because I've overcome the world. He promised to give us his peace. Not like the world gives. He made that distinction. He said, not like the world gives. My peace I will give to you. So even when we're facing difficult times, even when we have that opposition in life, we can still turn to God and say, God, I can't do this. I don't know what to do next. Help me. Give me wisdom. Give me direction. Draw me closer to yourself. We can do that in those moments. And so that's what Nehemiah was showing. He's facing that opposition. He didn't give up just because he had all this gumption. He knew God, and he had a relationship with him. We can't do most things on our own. We don't have that kind of strength when it comes to those kind of battles in life. We can do some things, but our strength and our courage must come from God. It has to. Otherwise, we'll only get so far, and then we'll just be like, I give up. But if we say, I can't do this anymore, but you can, and you're leading, go here next. Okay. That's what God does. That's what he did with Nehemiah here. Look at this. There's a few verses here, but these are so good. Chapter 4, verses 11 through 15. He says, also, our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to the work. Well, then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. It seemed like some pretty hopeless odds. This is Nehemiah's response, though. Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families. Fight for your sons and your daughters. Fight for your wives. Fight for your homes. When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each one to our own work. Do you feel like there's times in your life that it's just coming from all sides and you don't know what to do next? Do you feel like that? Have you felt like that? He heard what they were saying. There were people coming and saying, it's hopeless. They're going to attack us from everywhere. They're plotting against us. And we can't fight them. And Nehemiah, look what he did. He listened. As a leader, he listened. He understood. And then he started addressing the problems. There were holes in the wall. Those are the problems. So I want to ask you this morning, where are the exposed areas in your heart? Where are the exposed areas in the person that you care for, that you love, that you maybe work alongside, that you see that you can come alongside like them with their swords and spears and bows? You can come alongside them and say, I'm here for you. I know you're battling a real tough thing right now, but I'm not going anywhere. You know, in this chapter, there's so many great pictures that we see, because it said that half of the people were working with their trowels and building the walls, but they had their sword with them as they were working. And the other half were standing watch to make sure that no one would attack them. This is what we get to do for each other. Sometimes you're working, you've got the sword. The Bible says that the Spirit of God is our sword. The Word of God is our weapon. You have your weapon. You have the Word of God. and you're doing the work. But some of you, maybe you just need to stand guard and protect your brothers and sisters, to pray for them, to let them know you are here, you've got their back. And sometimes we switch those roles. This is what we get to do because the mission for us is people. It's people. God literally calls his church a building in certain scriptures. Stones that were living stones. And the people that don't know Jesus yet, he's inviting them to be a part of the wall. To be a stone in his house. To be a member of his family. That we're already a part of. That we get to invite them into. And we need to fight for them. Because they're out there on the outskirts. We're not trying to build a wall to keep them out. It's the enemy we're trying to keep out. It's the enemy that's trying to tear this down. But we get to come alongside them and say, come in here where it's safe. And help us build this wall up. When faced with that kind of opposition, remind yourself. And those that you're with, remind yourself and those that you're with of God's faithfulness. Because he is constantly faithful. Without fail. And sometimes we just need those reminders. As we're being led, we need those reminders. And if we're able to lead, we need to remind others. God is faithful. He's not going to give up on us. He hasn't forgotten about us. He's right here. We can do this. And the fifth brick that we see Nehemiah led with, he led with integrity and compassion. Nehemiah refused to exploit his position. Look at this in Nehemiah 5, just 2 verses, 14 and 16. Moreover, from the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when I was appointed to be their governor, remember this is a guy who started off as just a layman, just an average Joe, and now he's the governor. Because he trusted God each step of the way, and now he's capable and able and in position to lead people. We have those same opportunities. He said, when I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah until his 32nd year, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the food allotted to the governor. But the earlier governors, those preceding me, placed a heavy burden on the people and took 40 shekels of silver from them in addition to food and wine. Their assistants also lorded it over the people. But out of reverence for God, I did not act like that. Instead, I devoted myself to the work on this wall. All my men were assembled there for the work. We did not acquire any land. Wow. What a great example of a leader with integrity. Because he could have had that. It wasn't like he was inventing that. He said, all these guys before me, these governors, they already had that. They could have just kept going. Had all this extra food and taxed the people and got all this stuff. I could have gotten the wall built in time and been really enjoying life. But he said, out of reverence for God, I did not act like that. Jesus, the King of everything, who could have stayed on his throne, said, I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to go down there because that's where I need to be to rescue everyone. That's the heart of a servant and a leader. That's the heart of somebody that says, this is not what this is about. It's about God and people. And I get to serve them. Nehemiah led, but he was serving the people. They didn't even realize it. For those of us who get to lead others, when we realize that we're all called to lead people to Jesus and inspire and encourage, what a great example. To not take, but to give. Paul has said that many times in his letters, but Jesus, what an ultimate example we saw. Who said, I didn't come to be served. And he could have. He's the King of Kings. I didn't come to be served. I came to serve. That is godly leadership. That's what we get to do. That's what we're able to do. God has given you everything you need. You just need to, God, use me. Just that one step and that one decision to say, God, I'm yours. You have saved me. I'm yours. Reflect on that passage, or reflect on your own practices. How do you lead your family, community, coworkers, whatever you find yourself doing? How do you lead? Make sure that you're aligning your principles with what we see God's principles being. Now, in just a moment, we're going to watch a video here, but I want us to remember this. Because in these passages that we just read, Nehemiah, his leadership, he led through vision and prayer, took initiative. There was teamwork, there was resilience, and there was integrity and compassion. All incredible things that sometimes might feel pretty far from us. Like, I am not very compassionate. I would not make a good leader. Because I'd be like, you just need to get it done. But we can have that compassion. Nehemiah, I mean, if you read the book of Nehemiah, you know he didn't mess around either. I mean, he was pulling some beards at some of those enemies. Like, he got after it. But Nehemiah had compassion on people that needed that compassion because he had, again, a relationship with God. If we don't have a relationship with him, then there's many, 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 many things in this life we won't be able to experience. Joy, peace, goodness. Compassion is one of those. We can fake it a little bit, we can have glimpses of it, but we won't have true leadership potential in any area of our life unless we have a relationship with God. Because we haven't experienced freedom yet. When we experience that freedom, and now we're following the leader, now we see how we can lead others. So I want you to watch this video. It's just a few minutes. And this speaks about the Global Leadership Summit that we have coming up in August. That we're beyond excited about this, being able to be a host site for this. Because, again, we see things like this in the corporate world or teams and all this stuff. This is about what God is doing in and through people. So let's go. I mean, let's do this. And if you can't make that, this is not about one moment, right? This is about our lives, that we get to lead people to Jesus. I'm excited about this. We're going to be doing this here and in Edgerton as well. You got that card. There's more information there. I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity with some really amazing, inspiring, encouraging leaders. I just can't wait to see what God's going to do. And the more that we submit to him and follow him, allow him to use us, the more we're going to see people come along and we get to lead them.